Okay. Hello, everyone. This is the February webinar presented by the Essex County branch of Ontario Ancestors. My name is Linda Urquhart, and I'll be your host for tonight. So for those who are first-time visitors to our webinars, we are one of the 35 branches or special interest groups of Ontario Ancestors, formerly known as the Ontario Genealogical Society, which is the largest member-supported genealogical organization in Canada. It was founded in 1961 with its mission to encourage, bring together, and assist those interested in the pursuit of family history and to preserve Ontario's genealogical heritage. Before we start, we would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home, including the first inhabitants of Essex County, the Anishinaabe group, part of the Three Fires Confederacy, comprising the bands Potawatomi, Odawa, Ojibwa, or Chippewa, as well as the Huron or Wendat or Wyandot bands. We must all acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and consider how we can each in our own way try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So thanks for joining us. We hope you all had a wonderful holiday season and you were able to share family stories with your loved ones, as well as enjoy the traditions passed down from your ancestors. Just a reminder that this presentation is being recorded and will be added to our YouTube channel. Also, questions will be answered following the presentation. Just add any questions as we go along to the chat box, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. Here are the links that we show every webinar, but it is useful to visit them periodically as new things are added all the time. Feel free to take a screenshot. The first link is to our parent organization, Ontario Ancestors, where you'll find many Ontario resources. You just have to add your ancestor's name to the search bar and see what you find. Next is a link to the Essex branch website, which has Essex County resources, including our members library, which is packed full of local resources. Other links include our YouTube channel, where you can review past presentations. We always encourage you to interact with us by joining our Facebook group and following us on Twitter and Instagram. I'm sure that some of you have noticed the new look to our website, thanks to our webmaster, David Thompson. All of the same tabs are at the top of the site as they were in the older version, so it should be pretty easy to follow. But new to the website are the highlighted features, which we will change from time to time. Currently, they include some indexes, the next upcoming event, any special events, and every month we will highlight a feature resource from the members library. This month, the resource is the Assumption College yearbooks from 1921 to 1970. Hopefully you're all aware that Roots Tech 2022 registration is now open. This is free and virtual. I recommend that you take a look at the sessions planned and take the opportunity to learn from these educational events. There's multiple sessions in many, many categories. So just Google Roots Tech 2022 and you'll go directly to the registration site. And yes, again, it is free. And here are some of the upcoming webinars from other branches of Ontario Ancestors. Tomorrow night, Lambton is presenting A Sister Found. On Friday, the Kent branch offers Remembering Their Legacies, stories from Chatham-Kent's Black community. Next Saturday, the Simcoe branch presents Surviving the Famine, tracing the Irish famine generation in Ontario. And on the 17th, the Niagara branch shares Bound for Niagara, examining Underground Railroad genealogy. For other webinars, check out the event calendar at the Ontario Ancestors website. You'll find it under the Education tab. And just a reminder to save the date for the Ontario Ancestors Conference 2022, which will again be virtual. The theme of the conference is the past, the present, and the future. It will be hosted by the Ottawa branch on June the 24th to the 26th. Our next webinar is again on a Monday night on March the 7th, where we will be initiating something we haven't tried before. A group of Essex County researchers will share their research and the resources they used. We hope this will be very successful, and we encourage other family researchers to think about sharing their success stories with us at a future webinar. Tonight's speaker, Ruth Nicholson, is a proud United Empire Loyalist descendant who will discuss her research into the lives of 3 of her Loyalist ancestors who played an important role in the history of Upper Canada and early Essex County. Ruth Hutchins Nicholson was raised in Malden Township on the Hutchins farm, located at the south end of Howard Avenue, just north of County Road 20. She visits her home area often and goes down to the farm twice during the harvest season. As she states, it is wonderful to walk on the same land as her father Edwin, grandfather Maurice, and great-grandfather Francis Gore Hutchins. Ruth attended General Amherst High School in Amherstburg before completing her BA in Fine Arts at McMaster University, then her BEd at Queen's. She taught visual arts at elementary schools in Halton, Ontario from 1975 to 2009, and more recently was a volunteer online art teacher for the Halton District School Board. She met her husband David at McMaster, and they have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. Ruth is past president of the Hamilton branch of the UEL's Association of Canada and is the Dominion Conference chair and gives talks across the province about life in early Upper Canada. Ruth has 4 proven Loyalist ancestors: Jacob Arner, Henry Wright, Joseph Ferris from her maternal side, and John Cornwall from her paternal side. She's received too many awards to mention here, but many are for her UEL work. She received the Ontario Volunteer Award for 20 years of service to the Hamilton branch of the UEL's Association of Canada, as well as the Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Award for outstanding contributions to the understanding and preservation of our history and heritage. And now I will turn it over to Ruth, but remember to type your questions in the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and we will get to them after the presentation. I will now stop sharing my screen, and it's all for you now, Ruth.
Thank you. All right, I just have to answer a few questions as I come along here. There we go. This is my first time. We're good. All right. Funny, all these words on here. All right, participants, what they can see and so on. Anyway, thank you very much, Linda, for that great introduction. Essex County has been my roots for a long time, you know, being a farm girl. And we have, you know, the best soil in the country, we always say, and we always had great crops. And Eugene Whalen has a book that he wrote about the area, and he said that our farm was the best one in the county. So you got to go. It was a good farm, and it's still owned by my brother-in-law, Scott Wilkins, who started a winery on it. So we're well rooted in Essex County. But going to McMaster, as you mentioned, I ended up in the Hamilton area, and so most of my adult life has been in the adult area. So the 3 Loyalist heroes, 2 of them are my ancestors, Isaac Ferris and John Cornwall, one from each side, mother and father's side. And Robert Land is somebody who I learned about and totally respect and love his story. So I'm going to be sharing that one with you. And the title page that you see, those are maple leaves from my backyard. They're so beautiful, and they always represent Canada. And this is a reenactment officer that we have. He's General Brock. I think you would know that by looking. And we had a wonderful dinner to honor the 200th anniversary of the War of 1812. And Brock was our guest speaker. And this was at the time that he came to the Durand House. He's pointing to the Durand House up on the escarpment. And the name of it was Bellevue, just like the special name in Amherstburg is Bellevue. And at this time, he was recruiting people for the War of 1812 and going down to the Windsor area. So We have so many ties in Hamilton to my home area. I could do another whole speech about that. Okay, so good evening, and thanks to all who are zooming in across the country today. I'm so excited to share these stories that I've discovered, all reflective of heroism. Today, during this COVID pandemic, we talk about healthcare workers, teachers, cashiers, and all manner of frontline workers as heroes, and rightly so. They are all stepping up in this time of crisis and need. The stories that you'll be hearing today also reflect a time of crisis and need. So what is a hero? There are many qualities that make a hero. To me, it's a person who takes risks to make change. It's a person who put him or herself out there to possibly sustain ridicule over a controversial stand. It's a warrior or a soldier who is fighting for a cause. It's a person doing undercover work that is done in the name of protecting a great truth. And it's being on the ground floor of creating a country, a nation. That is what I see when examining the lives and actions of Robert Land, Isaac Ferris, and John Cornwall. To begin, I will tell you of the most famous of these three, Robert Land. Among historians in the Hamilton area, Robert Land's story is well known. It has a rough, honorable, and romantic edge to it that endears itself to most who have knowledge of it. This picture is of the former Robert Land Elementary School. It was an educational and social hub for over 90 years, built in 1914. When it closed, the people of the area wanted to retain a community resource center, and thus the Eva Rothwell Center was born. It has educational and recreational services for the family, for families in the area, and Robert Land name is still there. His name is in cement above the Eva Rothwell name. So I'm proud to see that his name is still there. So back to Robert Land. There are conflicting accounts about his birthplace. Early family research states that he was born in Tiverton, Devonshire, England in 1738. Then the muster roll for the New York troops, where Land enlisted, shows his birthplace as New York. Regardless, he settled in Calkins Creek in the Delaware Valley of Pennsylvania. This is where he built a log cabin. He was short, stout, and fair. And in 1757, he married a girl who was quite the opposite, tall and dark-haired, named Phoebe Scott. He would have been 19, and Phoebe would have been 21 at the time of their marriage. As a side note, Phoebe's brother is the famous rebel leader, Lieutenant Colonel Winfield Scott of Queenston Heights fame, where Sir Isaac Brock fought his last battle. In 1776, when the American Revolution broke out, Robert Land was 37 years old, so not a young man at all. He was a justice of the peace or magistrate with a family of 7 children, aged 19 to infant. Due to his loyalty to King George III, he joined the British forces. With a vast knowledge of the country, Robert Land was selected to carry dispatches from General Henry Clinton in New York to points north and west. According to James Elliott's book, If Ponies Rode Men, The Journeys of Robert Land, Land was also a recruiter for the crown, another difficult role. Here's a photo of James Elliott, historian and author, in front of the Robert Land vault at the Hamilton Cemetery on York Road across from Dundurn Castle. While Robert Land was away, his son Abel was abducted by the local Indigenous people. His oldest son John went to rescue Abel, and after running the gauntlet, the younger brother was released. Not long after that episode, John himself was taken prisoner by the rebel authorities, and he was held for the entire war. That was from 1776 to 1783, and John was captured in 1777. This left Phoebe, the mother, and the younger children to carry on and survive by themselves. One night in the autumn of 1778, when the family had gone to bed, a daughter, Rebecca, often called Kate, was awakened by a friendly native girl who told her to go and see what was happening across the river at the Kane's house. Kate crossed the river to discover that the house had been burnt down and the entire family had been murdered. Kate rushed back and quickly awakened her mother and the rest of the family. They hid in the fields, watching their home set ablaze by the rebels. For days, the family hid in the woods, moving stealthily on foot. It took them 10 days to reach New York, the safe haven of the British. Phoebe and her 5 children stayed in New York until the evacuation of the city in 1783. Phoebe eventually received a grant of land along the St. John River in what was to become the new province of New Brunswick. Here the family stayed for 7 years. During this time period, Robert Land was performing dangerous undercover work, carrying orders from the British General, Sir Henry Clinton, from New York to Fort Niagara and Montreal. In March of 1779, he was captured by rebel militia and brought before a military court in Essex, New York, charged with spying for the British. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging, but his conviction was overturned by none other than General George Washington on the grounds that as an inhabitant of one of the states, Land was not subject to the jurisdiction of a military court. Land was released on bail on the 30th of September, 1779, to await a new trial, but he jumped bail and joined a small party of Tories heading to Niagara. Robert was in the vicinity of his family home sometime after the property was burned and the family had left. Seeing the ashes and hearing about the Kane family, he surmised that his family had been killed. In great sorrow, Robert Land asked advice of a trusted Quaker neighbor, Ralph Morden, as to the route to Niagara. Ralph showed him an Indian ladder and pointed out the way. The ladder is simply a tree where the branches have been cut close to the trunk to form steps or rungs to climb upwards. It turned out that they were followed by an angry mob of rebels. Morden, who was a pacifist, believed that he would be safe, but the angry mob captured and hung both he and his son-in-law. Robert was faster paced and got away, but not before receiving a musket ball on his knapsack that hit with such intensity that it caused him to fall to the ground and cut his hand on a sharp rock. The rebels followed the trail of blood until darkness and then gave up, believing that Robert Land had gone off and died somewhere. Land actually kept moving, and he reached Fort Niagara, where he found safety with the British. The year was now 1779, and Robert was now 41 years old. He had completed 2 years of dangerous courier work. In 1780, Robert Land resumed his courier work, again traveling between New York, Niagara, and Montreal. In August of 1782, he arrived in Niagara and was not able to leave before the end of the war. As a Loyalist, Robert Land received a grant of 200 acres in the Lundy's Lane area of Niagara Falls, Ontario. So it didn't look like it does in that picture. That picture would be from the 1980s by the look of the cars, but that's Lundy Lane Street today. And Falls, though, is still the roaring falls that we see when we visit it in Ontario today. So this is where he lived and brooded over the fate of his family for 3 years. The noise of the Great Falls was so disturbing to him that he moved 50 miles away to the quiet of Burlington Bay in what is now Hamilton, Ontario. He lived here well back from the water on a deer trail on a slight rise of land. This is now the south side of Barton Street between Leeming Street and Smith Avenue. He lived in a dugout spot before he built a small log cabin. He cleared a bit of land and supported himself by hunting, fishing, and trapping in solitude. So this is a little better look of the street, and that is St. Matthew's, which is another community center for the Hamilton area. As a Loyalist, he petitioned for land in this area on May the 3rd of 1791, and he was assigned Lot 11 on the 3rd concession of the township of Barton, containing 100 acres. He farmed, hunted, and fished, and grew the area's first wheat. Back to the rest of the family. The eldest son, John, was released from confinement after the Revolutionary War. Since he had not taken up arms, he was allowed to own and occupy the family property on the Delaware Valley. So he built a new red home, married, and raised a family of 11. Back in New Brunswick, the youngest son, Robert II, had grown dissatisfied with the harsh conditions and the poor farmland. And at the age of 17, he persuaded his mother, Phoebe, to migrate with some others to Upper Canada, where life and farming should improve. It was now 1791. They took a ship as far as New York and visited John in his farm in the Pennsylvania area on the way. Here they learned about the death of the Morden men and the reputed death of their father and husband, Robert Sr. John was satisfied with his life in the Delaware Valley, and thus the rest of the family continued on to Niagara. After 1 year in this area, it happened that through an itinerant trader, they heard that there was a man named Land who was living alone at the head of the lake, another name for Hamilton area. Young Robert decided to go the 50 miles northwest to see who this man was and if there was a relationship. Not to be left behind, Phoebe and another of her sons, Ephraim, made the journey to that area, and they found Robert sitting outside the cabin smoking. After 11 years of separation, this was a euphoric moment. Can you just imagine? Later, 2 other sons and 3 daughters joined the other 4 family members. They worked hard to clear more land, and they became successful farmers. After more settlers arrived, Robert went back to his woodworking skills and crafted spinning jennies for weaving. A spinning jenny had 8 spindles instead of 1. By turning 1 wheel, 8 threads could be spun at once. Most homes had a loom and multiple spinning wheels to weave fabric for clothing and rugs in particular. And this is my loom that's in the basement. It belonged to my great-grandmother, and it's on the Arner and Eiler side of my family, and my grandmother used it almost daily. And underneath of it are 2 of her rugs. We have several of her rugs that are made from that wonderful barn loom, they would call it. Robert Sr. applied for a grant of land in 1794, and in 1802, he was allowed 312 acres that stretched from the mountain to the bay and from Wentworth to Emerald Street. So it took 8 years for that to come through, that grant for him. Each of his 4 sons, Abel, William, Ephraim, and Robert, acquired 200 acres in adjoining lots. Through land grants and purchases, the Land family came to own a solid block of over 1,000 acres, extending from the bay to the mountain, bounded on the east by Sherman Avenue and on the west by Wellington Street. This is now the central part of Hamilton. So if you look at my finger and you go straight north to the lake, and then go straight across, and just inside of that first yellow line, which is Gage, that's where Sherman is. So that was the section of land, the 1,000 acres that belonged to the Land family. Robert Land built a new home, and he built it back where my finger is, up at the escarpment area, not near the water. And he called it Land Home. It's at 341 James Street South. Only the 2 original pillars to the property remain. Here's a close-up of them. They're not in good shape, but that's the only thing that's left in the Hamilton area to show that Robert Land was even there. So the view from this area would be majestic, right down to the lake. So if you know Hamilton, St. Joseph's Hospital is just down to the right, and it takes quite a long time to even drive down there, let alone think about walking it or farming it. It's a big area. Robert Sr. assisted Anne Morden, who was Ralph's widow. So remember, Ralph and his son-in-law were hung. So Anne came up to this area and asked for help, and Robert gave her all the help he could do, and she became very well known and had a good life in the Dundas Valley. But when she came up, she had a bad story to go with it. This is one of the cradles that she carried. The Dundas Museum has these cradles that were brought up from the Delaware Valley that carried the Morden's infant grandchildren. Not long after Ralph and his son-in-law were hung, his daughter died of heartbreak. And so Anne, the grandmother, brought these 2 infants north to Upper Canada. So they still have the cradles. I think that's fantastic. Robert Sr. lived to see the beginnings of the village of Hamilton. He died in 1818 at the age of 80. Phoebe, his wife, died in 1826 at the age of 90. And today, the land name is on this little street. You can see it just up at the top right. And that is the big shipping harbor where all the big ships come in for agricultural products and the steel industry and all the different things that come in and out of our port. In my eyes, both Robert and Phoebe Land represent individuals who made many personal sacrifices, who took risks and rose above the strife of war and exile to make a substantial new beginning in a new land. This is our Hamilton Branch Plaquing Committee in 2010. The Hamilton branch of the United Empire Loyalist Association of Canada plaqued the main Hamilton Cemetery across from Dundurn Castle, where Robert Land and his family lay in the family vault. So here's the vault again. The family were originally buried in the old Anglican Cathedral Cemetery. However, in 1853, their son Robert Jr. reinterred his parents to this new vault. When we recognized Robert Land Sr. as a first Loyalist after the American Revolutionary War, over 100 people attended our ceremony in April of 2010. Brian Land, Professor Emeritus from the University of Toronto, is a direct descendant of Robert Land, and he spoke at this ceremony. Other family members had the key to the vault, and they allowed the public to go in and to visit the interior of the crypt. This event brought forward the epic story of Robert Land to the local people once again. And I've got on these gray colonial clothes, and that was because I was representing the lady on a monument, our monument in downtown Hamilton, at in a play at one time. And I just thought I was in kind of a stone area, being in the cemetery, so I would wear that kind of stone colored dress that day. Her Honor, Sophia Angelinitis, MPP, Minister of Consumer Affairs, stated, "There is surely no more remarkable story in Hamilton's history than that of Robert Land, the English lad who became a settler, magistrate, farmer, soldier, and spy, a Loyalist who lost everything, both family and home, and regained his family in this place overlooking the waters of Burlington Bay. Many of you know this remarkable story far better than I. It's the stuff of which legends are made. And yet, in another way, it's entirely ordinary. Land was among the very first pioneers to settle in this area, but dozens, then hundreds, then thousands came. People like him who left behind all they knew to brave a new land, which used their skills and sweat to build a new life for themselves and the generations yet to be born. And here's another remarkable thing. This is not merely a story of the distant past, they're still coming today. Now, don't these words ring as true today as they did in 2010? My next two examples of heroes are simply from my own research into two of my Loyalist ancestors. They are shorter stories, as no books or speeches of any sort has shone a light on their lives. So this is the Isaac Ferris tombstone. This is the back of the St. Andrew's Anglican Church. It was a Methodist church at the time of the burial, and these stones were all upright at one time, but apparently they became very crooked, and they had a mason who made this shape, this cross shape. So Isaac's stone is actually on the left-hand side, and it's the fourth one up. And we put a little plaque beside it I'll tell you about shortly. So Isaac Ferris is actually a second-generation Loyalist, being the eldest son of Joseph Ferris, my Loyalist ancestor on my maternal side of the family. Isaac was born in 1795 on Bois Blanc Island, Essex County. People still know that island as Boblo Island, but the proper name is Bois Blanc Island. Isaac was just 17 years old when the War of 1812 broke out with alarm at the northwest corner of Essex County. The Americans first invaded Upper Canada in 1812, crossing the Detroit River at River Canard. They were preparing to attack the British at Fort Amherstburg, known as Fort Malden today. General Isaac Brock, and here's our reenactment, man from Mississauga, again, as General Brock. He was alarmed at the American invasion. He set out with men in 5 bateaux from Fort George in the Niagara area. Many others actually marched to Amherstburg, including 100 men from Grimsby. Can you imagine walking to Amherstburg from Grimsby? Just astonishing. Brock and Tecumseh planned for the Battle of Detroit while in Amherstburg. And this is a monument at the Navy Yard Park honoring the War of 1812. It's a beautiful piece. The Essex and Kent volunteers were all part of the plan. Jacques Bobby was in charge of the 1st Kent, and William Caldwell was in charge of the 1st Essex Company of Volunteers, where Isaac Ferris served as a private. An article in the Amherstburg Echo newspaper from September 2, 1934 states, one night General Brock told his soldiers that there were some spies on Bois Blanc Island, and he asked for volunteers to swim the Detroit River in the dark and surround them. Isaac Ferris volunteered along with one other to undertake this task and did so at risk of drowning or death by rifle fire. That they both received beautifully engraved medals from Queen Victoria when she came to the throne. Here's another picture of Bois Blanc Island from the Elliott house and in the winter. So you can see the lighthouse and you can see a blockhouse, but the blockhouse was built for the 1837 revolution. In 1837, so it wasn't there at this time. Queen Victoria actually approved the offering of military general service medals in 1847. This was her 10th year on the throne, not her first year on the throne. And here's what the medal looks like. So Queen Victoria is on the front side, and on the back side is the spirit of victory, laying her hands on one of the soldiers. So these service medals were offered, I should say, to surviving claimants who were involved in one of the three most notable battles that were considered great victories for the British: Battle of Fort Detroit, Battle of Chrysler Farms, and the Battle of Chateauguay. So Isaac was 52 years old when he received this medal. And remember, he was 17 when he actually did that swim across to Bois Blanc Island. Each of these medals were inscribed with their surnames. So you can't see it very well, but if you look on the left-hand side, you can see a little bit of etching in there, and that actually says Ferris. So that is the true medal that he did receive. So we were very fortunate that a family member in Amherstburg still owns that medal and took some pictures of it before he passed away in 2016. Now, my family honored Isaac Ferris in May of 2014 as a veteran of the War of 1812. My nephew Bryce, that's my sister Susan's son, is unveiling the plaque, and there's reenactment men who are giving the veterans salute, which is 3 musket blasts. So the veteran plaque looks like this. So we received this granite marker in the mail after we applied and could prove that he was on the pay list of the Essex First. So it goes through the gravesite project honoring veterans of 1812. This was initiated by reenactment groups through the historical military establishment of Upper Canada. Isaac Ferris took part in the Battle of Raisin River and the Battle of the Maumee also. And it's interesting, the design on this. These were first to be medals that were given out to everyone at the War of 1812, but they couldn't figure out how to do it. So they eventually melted them down, and the money from that metal went into the construction of the first hospital in Toronto. But the design on it is very interesting. The squiggle on the center part on the left-hand side, that is the Niagara River. And on the right-hand side is an eagle with a broken wing. So you know who that represents. And on the other side is a beaver gnawing at a tree. So I really think that's a great design. All right. So this was the certificates now that show that I'm a bloodline back to Joseph Ferris. That's the father of Isaac Ferris. And these the certificate at the bottom is the one that we got in 2012. And that was, Amherstburg had a wonderful ceremony called Roots to Boots. And we had 9 family members from my cousin Louise Ferris from Lethbridge, Alberta attended, as well as many people from the Ontario area. So we had 9 family members receive those certificates and to remember Isaac Ferris in this way. So he died in 1881 at the age of 85 years and was considered another living legend during his lifetime. My final segment is about John Cornwall, my Loyalist ancestor on my paternal side, my 6th great-grandfather. He was born and raised in Danbury, Connecticut in 1748, the son of Captain John Cornwall and Hannah Knapp. They lived in a large home on a large property, and today the area bears the Cornwall surname. Since John Cornwall always attached himself to the royal cause, he and his family were under suspicion and scrutiny from the rebels. After continual persecution, he left Connecticut on May the 2nd of 1776 for New York to join one of the king's regiments. On his way, he was apprehended by the rebels and thrown into prison at Esopus in one of the floating jail ships for 5 months. He then escaped, so he likely jumped overboard and swam away, and he made his way to Albany that summer. In May of 1777, he joined a famous loyalist, Peter Ball, and the two of them recruited and led 32 strong men through the wilderness to Lieutenant John Butler, who was on the Susquehanna River. He served as a sergeant that summer and winter under Captain John McDonald. In January, he took the express to Detroit, where he resided until the end of the war. Now, this is the Loyalist map of the new settlement area. So that's the southwest corner of Essex County, and these are the 97 lots that were surveyed for the Loyalists. John Cornwall received lot 97, the most westerly lot, so the very last one on the left. It's the closest to Amherstburg, and he had it in the beginning in 1786. These lands weren't actually officially granted until 1792, after the lengthy official survey of Patrick McNiff. But people were living on them before, and they were developing them and making them into farmland and so on. This is the Cornwall land petition that I got through the Brock University at Niagara, and I'm so proud to see that John Cornwall was a learned man. He signed his name beautifully. He's the only one of my ancestors that could sign his name. All the rest had an X. So that's a beautiful document for the family to have and to see. So anyway, he did sell that land in 1789 to John Sparkman, and then he moved up the Thames River and ended up living in the Kent County area for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, his wife Mary and his 4 children had been driven from their homes in Connecticut with only the clothes on their back. They lived with Mary's sister in a nearby county until the end of the war. The family joined John in 1797 after an astounding separation of 21 years. That was from 1776 to 1797 to be apart. So this is the Parliament area at that time at Fort George today. This is Navy Hall. John Cornwall was a farmer and a politician. He succeeded Francois Bobby as the legislative representative of Essex County in 1797 at John Graves Simcoe's second Parliament of Upper Canada that ran from 1797 to 1800 at Navy Hall, now part of Fort George. So it's the large building with the flag on it. During this term, Parliament moved from Newark, which is Niagara-on-the-Lake today, to York, or Toronto today. It was felt to be a more secure position, further away from the American border. So you can see Fort Niagara across the river. It looks like it's a little bit further than Amherstburg to Bois Blanc Island, but it was not far enough to be safe. So that is why Parliament was moved to York. This is the Simcoe Monument that is at Fort George, and it shows Lady Simcoe with John. John and his wife, Mary Benedict, had 4 children, 3 sons, Joshua, Wheeler, and John, and a daughter, Mary. John Cornwall's son, Joshua, is my 4th great-grandfather, and he followed his father's footsteps as a parliamentarian in Upper Canada's 7th Parliament that went from 1817 to 1820, representing the county of Kent. His son, Nathan, also served as a parliamentarian in the 12th and 13th Parliaments of Upper Canada that went from 1835 to 1840 for Kent County. In summary, here's the 3 street signs with their names. I feel that these 3 men, Robert Land, Isaac Ferris, and John Cornwall, were heroes in a variety of ways, acting as a spy, a recruiter, a soldier, an escapee, and a parliamentarian. In all ways, these early residents of Upper Canada and their families helped to shape the country that we live in today. I think their stories are worth relating. And I'd like to just show you the Loyalist flag. So this was the flag of Great Britain from 1606 until 1801. So the red cross, of course, is for St. George of England. and the white diagonal cross on the navy is for Scotland, for St. Andrew. And then in 1801, Ireland joined. So now the Union Jack has a narrow red line on top of the white cross of St. Andrew. And I have a friend who went through McMaster and Queens with me, and she's a wonderful quilter. And she quilted this monument picture for me. And so I wanted to show you that that was the lady that I was representing in a play at one time for our branch. So this is a monument that's in downtown on Main Street in front of the courthouse area. And it shows a family who has received their paper to say which lot is going to be theirs, and they're going to go out and get it. This monument was dedicated by Mr. and Mrs. Stanley Mills on Empire Day, May the 24th of 1929. There's many inscriptions on it, and I'm just going to share a very short one with you today. No country ever had such founders. No country in the world. No, not since the days of Abraham. And that was written by Lady Tennyson. I've got 2 pages of resources that you can discover some of these yourself. David Botsford was the curator at Fort Malden for a long, long time, till 1965. And I remember he taking me through in the 60s with my father, because I wrote my first speech about important historical elements in the Amherstburg area when I was in grade 6. And here I am still doing it. So that particular book, he only made 50 copies of it. So I'm really fortunate to have one. And then Chris Carter, he's the acting president of the Harrow Research area. It's called AIRS, H-E-I-R-S, Harrow Early Immigrant Research Society. He's written many, many books. They're all excellent. So this is just one that I've named. The 2 county biographicals, where people who had been pioneer families were interviewed, and those are pretty much the Bibles of the area to look at all the early residents of Essex and Kent County, from done in 1904 and 05. Everyone knows Cruikshank's book of Butler's Rangers, and I showed you Elliott's book of If Ponies Rode Men. Margaret Houghton was the archivist in the Hamilton downtown cemetery, in the Hamilton Library for many, many years. She wrote a whole lot of books. She knew about the cemeteries, of course, but she knew about all the famous people. So that was the one on famous lives that she has Robert Land in it. La Jeunesse was a professor at the University of Windsor, and that's a wonderful book. It's got Cornwall in it. And then this is one of the best books that's been written on Tecumseh. I highly recommend it. The archives I went to online, the Danbury one, to learn more about Cornwall, the Ayers one to learn about my 2 ancestors, and the Ontario archives. And then the newspapers, the Amherstburg Echo from 1934, that was in a family Bible, that article, and I was really fortunate that the date was on it and the paper was on it. The Hamilton Spectator told all the story about our plaquing in 2010, and I have a paper called The War that was written in 1812, and it talks about how General Hull gave up Detroit, and it's a very shameful thing, and it's a wonderful piece to read. The websites I'd tell you to go to if you'd like to look into plaquing a veteran of 1812 is that Graveside Project. And our Loyalist website, the main one, is uelac.org. And we have a directory. If you go in there and you look on the top left, we have a directory, alphabetical order. And there's hundreds and hundreds of Loyalists that have been documented and researched, and they're all free for you to look at. It's a fantastic resource. And that's my email. If anybody wants to contact me, ruth.nicholson.ue@gmail.com. So thank you for coming in across the country and taking a little piece of your time today to share it with me.
Well, thanks, Ruth. That's great. I think we'll go for questions now. I'm going to pass it on to Pat to see if she's got any pet questions yet.
Yes, we have a few questions that have come in. The first one was from Heather. Let me see here. She's asked if you have any tips to find out more about my UEL ancestor who I think was involved in recruiting others to fight for the British in the US and also involved as a spy. It sounds intriguing.
What you have to start with the name, we have two volumes that people that researched before we had all this privacy business come up. And I think it's 1984, and that's the first place I go to see if people have researched that, because it'll say which branch that did the research, and each branch across Canada has a genealogist that has all the information that that people that have done it through that branch, and most of the time they've been given permission to share it. So I often do it that way. But if you looked at our uelac.org, maybe the person is right there. You could see that we have given our many documents to Brock University. There's a special Loyalist library there, and that's a really great place to go. So those would be my three spots. But if you know where they lived and so on, if they were in Harrow, then you go to Ayers. If they're, it's kind of where they are. We have resource areas across the country, depending on where they settled, that people can help you. But if you go to the branch that is associated with that area, because my people are all associated with Essex County, so that's the Bicentennial branch, and everyone has a website. You just Google it, and you'll come up with how to reach them. If you have any trouble, you've got my email address. I'll be happy to give you some further advice. Okay.
Okay, thanks very much, Ruth. I hope that's been helpful for Heather in her pursuits. The next question is from Sandra, and she says, near the beginning, I think you mentioned Kane, who had died, and thereby Lane thought the rest of his family had died also. Could you please clarify, as I'm not sure that I heard it correctly? And also, apparently there was a Kane Bible that had been mentioned, or that had been donated to a museum down in Niagara, and she's wondering if anyone knows where it might be.
The Kane family lived across the Delaware River from where the Robert Land family lived. And so when Rebecca was awakened in the night, she went over and saw that Kane family had been killed. Not to say that there weren't other surviving, members, because often there were brothers and sisters and so on that lived in an area, but I don't have the names of them, except that it was the Kane family. And I'm pretty sure that came from If Podies Rode Men, that book. I've got it right here beside me. Right here. So anyhow, yeah, here it is. So it would have been in here about the Kane family. So they were killed, yes. And the other times I talked about death was, that they thought Robert had, that they thought Robert had died. They thought Phoebe had died, but they hadn't. And then they met up, so many years later, a dozen years later, up in Hamilton. So, I always tell children, and when I'm giving talks at schools, that, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have telephones. To be able to meet up again was so difficult. It's a vast area. When you think of Phoebe being in New Brunswick, and Robert Land traveling between Montreal and Niagara, and it's just astounding that they met up at all. So anyway, that I think that's all I can tell you on the Kane family, but they could be loyalists as well. I don't know the Kane family myself. I'd have to start researching it. But again, I would go to those two volumes of people who have researched. And I'd also go into the UALIC and see if someone has researched the Kane family through that area, through our loyalists already. Because if they've done it, then there's no use reinventing the wheel. You go to people that have done the research first. Okay.
Okay. Now she asks also about the Kane Bible. Do you know anything about that?
No, if you know anything, if she has a Kane Bible, I mean, that is something we need to really see who those names are, and see if there are some associated names that have been, researched or whatever. To have a family Bible is just Oh, remarkable. I have none in my family. I wish I did. They're great. So there has to be a way to find a Kane descendant that would value that. So I would start with the UELAC website to see if the Kanes are there, and look at the names in the Bible and see if they cross-reference. So that's a beginning.
Okay, thank you. I hope that's helpful for who is that?
Jennifer.
Sandra. Okay. Now we have a question from another Heather. You've mentioned resources, but Heather asks, what are your favorite resources or books for researching UEL ancestors? Is that one of those things that it's hard to pinpoint just a few?
I always, being from Essex County, I go to the Essex County Biographical, very, very first thing. Global Genealogy has been saying that they would reprint that, but I haven't seen it being reprinted yet. So you have to go to somewhere like Ayers or a library down in that area to get that. This is my copy of the Essex County Biographical that my sister copied for me. So I have it all here, and I refer to it first thing. That is the greatest thing. Global Genealogy did publish the Kent County one. So when they're published, they're in a beautiful volume like this. And you can see I have all kinds of pages marked. So that's my favorite resource to go to for my area. But if you're not in Essex or Kent County or somewhere that's done a biographical like that, I start by, as I said, go to the website with the Loyalists, go to Brock University. Their archives are fantastic, and there's people that will really help you, even just an email, because that John Cornwall document I got just by asking a question and through an email, and they sent it to me. So Brock University is a fabulous area to ask questions. Okay.
Okay, that's great. Now a question from Cindy. She's wondering, where did you locate the 1792 map?
Oh, that was through the federal government. We have that in our library, the Hamilton branch, and it was a member of parliament. Her last name was Fish. I forget her first name. And she had these, they're like posters, it's thick paper posters, and they're in a big carrying case, and they are beautiful. So that's where you got it. I would think that you could get that online as well. I took that down to different people in Essex County to make copies of it. So that's what I did. I mean, I've got an old map behind me, but it's not that one, but it was through the federal government. And if Cindy wants me to get that information, I can, because it's in our library, the Hamilton Branch Library.
I think too, this is Linda talking. I think too, they have it at the Windsor Public Library. They have a whole collection of these old maps. So one of that looked familiar, the one that you showed in your PowerPoint. So I think they might have it there too.
I would hope so, because it was a federal document, so it should be. I don't remember the year that it was done. It's been quite a long time ago. I would think it would be done in the 80s, would be my guess. Yeah.
Okay, now Cindy also says you mentioned Brock University as the location where you found she says 1979 land petition, or would that be?
It was Cornwall's land petition.
And
it's not 1979.
Yeah.
It'd be more like 1797 or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's wondering if you can share a bit about that discovery.
Well, that's what I just shared, that I knew that the Niagara branch, which is called Butler's Ranger branch, and our branch, the Hamilton branch, and other branches have paid for files they're actually stored at the Ontario Archives, but we wanted a special place where people could just go and search for Loyalist information, and Niagara is really one of the core places. I mean, Belleville, Brockville, all those places are very significant, but Niagara had so many settlers, and because that's where all the, the soldiers at the time, the regiments were all stationed down there and then given their land. So Brock University has all the microfiche and all the information we've pretty much taken from the Ontario archives, that they have their own copies, and they're specialists in that area. So when I asked a question about John Cornwall, I just went by email to find, the Loyalist library at Brock University, and I put in a query, and I got information back right away, and attachments, and this was the document that was sent. So that's how it happened. You just have to keep asking questions.
Yes, keep asking. That's awesome. Okay, and another question from Sandra. Is the monument after a certain family?
No, the monument is not a certain family, but it was a certain family that it was a well-known family, the Mills family. They had the Mills China shop for years and years on James Street, and they were a wealthy family and very proud of their Loyalist roots, and so they gave the money to have that made for the city of Hamilton. They tell me that royalty would come in the middle of the night to pick their china out from Mills China shop. So it was a very significant shop, and it was around when I was in university in the 70s. I got to go through all the floors of china. It was fantastic. So, but it was not their family. It was it's a fictitious family, yes.
Okay, now it looks like Heather went looking about her ancestor and said, he is there, but I found nothing about the spy part. Thank you, Ruth.
Okay.
And let's see now, what else?
If Heather looks and sees who did the research, then she can ask the branch genealogist, if and often the people have contact information there, and you can go, directly to the people and ask some questions, because you can't put everything in the stories. I've written stories for all 4 of my ancestors that are on the UELAC, the Loyalist documentation area, but there's always more to say, so you might just miss a piece.
Yeah, keep following up and asking questions.
That's right.
Someone said the new website for UELAC is uelac.ca and has a new updated Loyalist Directory.
Okay. They did just update it. That's right.
Okay, and what else? Let me see. Excellent presentation. Can you share any hints on how we can get our children engaged in our own family UELAC history?
Well, I have 3 children, and I think a lot of people find out about their families when it's too late, after they've died. You hear that all the time. And after my parents had died in the late 90s, we 3 sisters had to take things apart in the house, and we discovered Loyalist things at that time, and then we said, well, my sister Mary was living in one area, I was living in another area. We both went to meetings, we got totally involved, and we got really interested in it, and we started researching. So at that time, I had to get archives. The Ontario archives would send 3 reels at a time to the Burlington Library for I think I had it for maybe a month. So I'd go down after teaching or on weekends, looking at all this old script and so on. And it took me a year to do my first certificate. But then I brought my family in, and I proved for all of them. So they all went to the ceremony to get their certificates. So they're hearing the stories. They're seeing how proud their mother is of this family documentation, and that, the history of Canada, the history of Ontario, the history of North America, it's all involved. And when I speak locally, they come out and hear me talk and things like that. I have a lot of artifacts around here because I've been, being a teacher, I was one of the people that visited schools. Sometimes we do 50 school visits in a school year, and we had a whole carload. It took 5 tables to take all these different, toys and pots and beaver skins and maps and everything to tell the story of the Loyalists. So I have all these artifacts. So now I'm taking pictures of them, and I'm going to make them into like a photo book. And so I'll be able to tell the family will get that as a gift, and they'll see the interest of, that cowbell came from the Hutchins farm, and, and all these different things. So things like that kind of help. If you can give them something that they can touch instead of just always hearing about it, I think that's important. That's what I do. Of course, I was also a visual art teacher, so seeing things and touching things, that's important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I think sometimes it's just a matter of time and hearing more and more stories that that people grow to be more interested in.
That's right.
Now, someone asked, how long does the process typically take between the application and receiving UEL status? And what are the costs associated? Is there a lot of variation to that?
It depends on what research you've got. It has to be first proofs. So you really need to get in contact with a genealogist, and they can tell you all that information. I did mine, quite a while ago, and I don't know. I think it was $45 for the first one, and then I think it was a little bit less for each one. So I, because I was doing 9 at a time, they didn't each cost $45. So, but you really need assistance from the genealogist to be able to show you what are considered, first proofs. The documentation is the challenging part of it, especially the 3rd generation. It's always the first generation, they were Loyalists for sure. The second, they were really proud that they were sons or daughters of the Loyalists. The grandchildren, they grew up, they didn't know anything special about it. And it's really, really hard because it's before the 1851 census, and that's always the area we get stuck on. And it's super tough. So I had my Essex County biographical. You have to get a whole preponderance of other things that you can find through, obituaries, family Bibles, things like that. That 3rd generation is the stickler. After that, it's not hard to do. So after you've done one, I think it's easier. It didn't take me a year to do the others, but the very first one, it took, of course, I was teaching full time. It took me a year to do it, but I don't think it usually takes, quite that long. But it's not an easy process. It's not, it's not like getting your boating license or anything like that. It's a challenging, but it's really worthwhile, and it's really something to be proud of, I think.
Oh, for sure. As you say, lots of documentation required.
Yes.
Now, someone asked, how can we access the list of books again? I assume that's the list that you put up at the end of your presentation. I don't know.
Do you want me to send it to you? But it will be on, I think it will be part of what will go up on YouTube, right?
Yes.
It will be there. I didn't think about it as a handout. Oh, there's one of my friends, Carl Stourmiest. Hi, Carl. Thank you.
Okay. And okay, let's see, there's lots of comments here. Thank you. And thank you again. Someone referenced the Canadian County Atlas Digital Project. I think I've got just about everything. I don't see anything new.
Okay, good.
Linda, did you have anything?
Well, I was just going to say, if there are no more questions, we are beyond our normal time limit. So I just wanted to thank Ruth again for offering us this presentation. I do believe that if you go on the UELAC website, and if you can find that your ancestor has already been proven to be a Loyalist, then your job is to then prove that you are related to that person. And the genealogist for the branch of the UELAC association will will tell you what you need to do and what you need to find. I don't know if they actually can help you. I don't know if Deborah Honor has done many of these for the
Oh,
Essex
yes.
County branch. I'm not sure if she's here tonight, but so I think
Mhm.
there is help for you. But if you don't have if your ancestor isn't already proven, then I think it's a really, really big job from that point on. That's probably what you had to do, Ruth.
I
You had
did.
to prove them. Yeah.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
all 4 and none of them had been proven. So let me tell you,
Right.
it was a new job to me and I was able to do it. So the genealogists will guide you. They won't do it for you. Some people pay a genealogist to do it for them. It won't be a branch genealogist they don't usually do it. It would be outside genealogists, that some people pay them to do it. But it is a challenging and tough job.
Absolutely. I just
Mhm.
wanted to say too that my husband has an ancestor that is a proven loyalist, but it's not from the War of Independence. It's from the 7 Years' War. So it goes way back when it was the French,
Mhm.
because he's descended from the early French settlers in Essex County. So that's what we need to do, is actually prove that he is related, and we really already almost have that done. So I think it's time for me to put in an application for sure. You've given me incentive to do that for
Oh,
sure.
that's great. Well, it's something that you hand down to your family. They'll always have it, and and we can put UE at the ends of our names because we have proven it. I know a lot of people out in East Coast, they all know they're all loyalists because they all landed out there from New York and they're not as interested in proving it. And they can write UE, that's fine. But I didn't know it until I really proved it, So, okay, yes, Lori is the branch genealogist of the bicentennial branch, right, for Essex and Kent, and she's a big helper. She's
Oh, yes.
yeah, she's great. Yeah, I
She
know Deborah
can
Honor.
be found at the Essex
Mhm.
Community Historical Research Society out in the little town of Essex.
Yes,
She runs
Eckers,
that
Eckers, the old
Eckers.
library. Mhm,
Right.
that's,
Yes.
yes, I know
Okay.
Lori.
Well,
Yeah,
we really should wrap this up though. So thanks again. It's been very interesting, very informative, and
great.
well organized. You've given us all incentive to get working on our own UE symbols that we can have. So
Great.
I'm going to say goodnight to everybody and hope that we see everybody again in March.
Okay.
So good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.